Welcome the chosen ones. When heaven files a case, even silence is proof. Let it soak in, since God is not whispering right now. He's pacing the courtroom of heaven, robes swinging, eyes blazing. The gavel is ready to fall. Not on you, but on them. They believe they could torment a soul shrouded in innocence and walk away as if the cosmos were blind. They believed spiritual offenses had no consequences, that emotional assassins may go home clean. But here is a fact. In ancient law, the punishment for giving false testimony was more than merely disgrace. It was the precise penalty they sought for the innocent. So what happens when dozens of individuals band together against a single chosen soul, and heaven thinks it's time to balance the scales? You guessed it, mass spiritual eviction. Heavens, you're not playing fairly. It's playing well. And let's be honest, some of these people are soon to discover the hard way that karma is more than just a feeling. It's God's legal helper. Oh, and if you've ever wondered whether God takes treachery personally, particularly when it happens to one of his own, fasten your seatbelt. Because now we will reveal what occurs when divine judgment is no longer deferred and becomes hazardous. Let's get to it. Number 1, they did not just lie on you. They lied to the divine about you. They did not merely lie to you. They lied to the divine about you. That is why God is enraged. This was not ordinary slander. This wasn't simply someone ranting out of envy or hate. This was a spiritual onslaught camouflaged as minor gossip. They opened their lips and rewrote your whole tale, expecting no one would fact-check it, unaware that the author himself was listening. They attempted to portray you as guilty when you were nothing but submissive, loyal, and silent. Even worse, they believed they were compelling enough to fool heaven. They weaponized words like daggers. They did not say, "This person has hurt me." They said that this guy is a problem. They didn't just criticize what you did. They questioned who you are. And there is a difference. One is human conflict. The second is identity assassination. These individuals distorted your name, derided your vocation, and characterized your character in ways that degraded your dignity while laughing as if it were innocuous. That is why this extends beyond karma. This is now personal to God. They didn't just insult you. They insulted God's choice to choose you. When someone ruins the reputation of a designated individual, they are not just conducting a smear campaign. They oppose divine judgment. You did not appoint yourself. You did not anoint yourself. God did it. And the moment they approached you as if you were just another random individual, they entered perilous area. They believed they were talking about you to others, but they were really talking against you in front of the person who sealed you. It's like going into a courthouse and lying about an innocent person, hoping the judge isn't paying attention. They didn't comprehend that paradise does not need attorneys. God serves as the witness, judge, and verdict. And when falsehoods are uttered concerning the innocent, divine judgment does not need a defense. It elicits a violent reaction. So certainly you remain silent. You remained kind. You persevered. But they forgot that while you were quiet, God was recording. And every false phrase they believed they had buried is now being exploited to expose their own spiritual repercussions. This isn't simply retaliation. This is a heavenly correction. And it is already in action. Number 2, they did not abuse you. They insulted God's choosing procedure. They didn't just abuse you. They insulted God's choosing procedure. That's what makes this unique. This wasn't only about personal animosity, jealousy, or miscommunication. It was deeper. They were not unhappy with your personality. They were upset that you were picked while they were not. It's not that you did something wrong. Your entire being as a selected one revealed their spiritual rejection. They couldn't handle it. They couldn't comprehend that God would choose someone like you instead of them. You didn't match the picture they had in their brain. You were not loud enough, polished enough, likable enough, or broken enough to meet their definition of worthy. They waited for God to pick someone they could manage, praise, or tolerate. But instead, He picked you. Quiet, very attentive, and perfect yet faithful. And this screwed with their ego. So rather of accepting God's choice, they attempted to oppose it by ripping you apart. They pretended to have the right to overrule God's will. They hoped that their criticism of you would cause you to stop calling. They really thought that if enough people decided to detest you, heaven may alter its mind. That is how delusional pride manifests when individuals believe they are more virtuous than God. But the more they attacked you, the more they revealed why they were not picked. Because a faithful servant of God makes judgments that do not generate conflict. They respect them even if they don't comprehend. You posed a spiritual danger not because of what you said or did, but because of who you were. You demonstrated that God picks the invisible, neglected, and misunderstood. You were a live contrast to their religious rituals, phony humility, and self-proclaimed significance. Instead of repenting, they retaliated. But it's too late to reverse what has been done. They did not just dispute your task. They challenged the person who allocated it. Heaven does not take this lightly. They ridiculed the throne with their deeds. They disrespected God's wisdom. And now he's responding. Not with words, but with rage. Because when humans attempt to meddle with divine order, they are not simply exposed. They are corrected in front of everyone. Third, they wanted blood, not truth, since your innocence proved their guilt. They did not want the truth. They wanted blood. That is what made it so hazardous. Your innocence was not simply overlooked. It was something they actively despised. You were not a danger because you had done anything bad. You were a menace because you did not. You were not turbulent, scandalous, or deceptive enough to fit into their mess. So rather than leaving you alone, they attempted to destroy you. And not quietly either. They did it loudly, confidently, and unanimously, as if your demise was something they deserved. Your purity made them uneasy. Your tranquility irked their devils. Your capacity to stay courteous, grounded, and unconcerned in the midst of their abuse demonstrated exactly how corrupt they had become. They couldn't take it. You didn't have to clap back or prove anything. Standing there with clean hands was enough to reveal all they'd been hiding behind. Fake smiles, fabricated stories, and coerced partnerships. They needed you to fall. They wanted you to snap. Because if you remained grounded, their whole plot crumbled. They needed something foul on you to justify the filth they were already drowning in. But nothing stuck. You did not give them what they wanted. And this drove them nuts. So they did like broken people do. They lied. They exaggerated. They produced drama where none existed. They transformed their guilt into a trial. And let's be honest, some of them weren't simply out to harm you. They were attempting to erase you, destroy your reputation, diminish your influence, and cancel your calling. All because they couldn't take the fact that you walked with a degree of favor. They never earned. It was not personal. It was spiritual. And when someone is spiritually out of sync, they will constantly want to crucify what is pure in order to feel better about what is corrupt. But God observed every twisted word. Every communication happens behind closed doors. Every trap is laid. And now He is answering. Not because you are faultless, but because you were innocent in the face of blatant hatred. They were hunting for filth, but God discovered a pristine soul. And now He's making a loud demand for justice. Number 4, God remained quiet. He was not missing. Rather, He was collecting receipts. They saw God's silence as consent. They mistook His silence for indifference. Or worse, He agreed with them. But they didn't comprehend that when God is silent, it's not because He's doing nothing. It's because He records everything. Every muttered insult, every phony grin, every lie spoken behind your back. Heaven didn't ignore it. Heaven was archiving it. You were not being neglected. You were being watched under guard. God did not intervene early because He understood the truth needed to be revealed without intervention. If He had halted the storm too quickly, many would have doubted your power. They would have assumed you were saved rather than righteous. But now there is no doubt. You didn't just endure it. You remained clean throughout. And while they were busy creating traps, laughing, and waiting for your demise, God was preparing a legal case in the spirit that no one saw coming. Divine judgment does not necessarily come crashing down like thunder. It sometimes builds up like a wave. It is silent, heavy, and difficult to avoid once it strikes. God did not forget what they did. He did not ignore how they handled you. He was only giving them time to repent. Not because they deserve it, but because you do. Because the kindness He showed them was His way of respecting the love you still had for some of them, even when they didn't deserve it. However, that moment is past. What's coming isn't emotional vengeance. It is a legal correction from the highest authority. And it will be accurate because God acts after quiet without confusion. It comes with receipts. Nothing will be overstated. Nothing will be left out. Everyone engaged will get a percentage. And the same people who believe that if God existed, He would have stopped me are about to see what it looks like when God chooses to answer unexpectedly. You were not forgotten. You were being guarded in slow motion. And now the judge is standing. Case closed. Number 5. They believed they were testing you, but they were on trial the whole time. They really felt they were testing you. Your patience, strength, and character. They prodded at your wounds, drew out your triggers, and expected you to collapse, lash out, or lose yourself. But they didn't comprehend you were never the one being tested. They represented your life, reaction, and quiet. It all exposed them. Heaven took notes. God did not enable the persecution to determine whether you would live. He knew you would. You were made for it. The true objective was to disclose them, to demonstrate how much evil they were willing to entertain, say, and engage in when they believed there would be no repercussions. Your presence was a mirror. You revealed the jealousy. They attempted to dress up as concerned. You revealed what they term protection. You revealed the bitterness. They attempted to conceal with false knowledge. They could have walked away. They could have checked themselves. They could have chosen humility. But instead, they chose brutality. They selected it with full knowledge. They passed up every chance to demonstrate sympathy. They weaponized every weakness you demonstrated. They failed the test by demonstrating that they would rather be right than righteous. That's why God is stepping in. Not because you couldn't handle it, but because they couldn't rely on your presence. They assumed this was a game. They had no idea it was an inquiry. They thought they were watching your answer while God was really monitoring theirs. How far will they go to bring you down? How far will they go to portray you as the problem? How much vitriol will they spew in the name of the truth? That was what heaven wanted to see. And now that everything is evident, judgment is coming. Not emotional reaction, but heavenly accountability. They were not exposing you. They were unveiling themselves. The mask has been removed permanently. What they mistook for your collapse was really theirs under heavenly scrutiny. And now they're the ones being sentenced. Not because you asked for it, but because they deserved it. Number 6, you were the lamb that was murdered. But this time, God isn't allowing it for their salvation. They treated you like a sacrifice, as if the suffering they inflicted on you would somehow purify them, as if they could only shatter you, humiliate you, and isolate you sufficiently. Perhaps they'd be more comfortable with their own darkness. They transferred their guilt onto your name, convincing themselves that their actions were justifiable. They weren't just harsh. They are computed. They came together, spoke their falsehoods, and pretended to deliver you over to the flames. It was some kind of required cleaning. However, there was no redemption in their motivations. Only ego and only evil. They told everyone you deserved it. They transformed your quiet into guilt, your power into arrogance, and your insight into disobedience. They used you as a scapegoat for whatever they couldn't control, comprehend, or dominate. They did not wish to heal. They sought a target. So they chose the one who had never fought dirty, the one who continued to forgive, the person who had every opportunity to clap back but did not. You were innocent, and this is what made you dangerous to them. But this time, heaven will not let it go. God isn't turning this into a lecture about suffering for the greater benefit. This is not about carrying a cross to help them discover grace. The door is closed. What they did was not holy. It was unfriendly. And your grief is no longer being exploited for their redemption. It is being presented as proof. What they did to you has become a spiritual bill. Heaven always gathers. They figured they could use you up, drain your energy, assault your reputation, and walk away unharmed. But they didn't expect miraculous reversal. God is not disregarding what has transpired. He is not using religious terminology. He is calling it what it was: unfair, nasty, abusive, and completely responsible. There will be no rest for those who sought consolation via your devastation. They didn't just abuse you. They mistreated a soul with which God had entrusted them. And now the exact suffering they sought to obliterate is in the limelight. Heaven is exposing every secret purpose, whispered treachery, and quiet spectator. Justice is not coming. It has already come. Number 7. They made their reputation by shattering yours. Heaven is now reversing its currency. They didn't only ruin your reputation, they utilized it. They made your struggle into a tale. Your errors become entertainment, and your recovery process becomes a punchline. The more they warped your image, the more attention they received. The more they humiliated you, the stronger they felt. They elevated their prestige by exploiting your sorrow, which they referred to as truth-telling, venting, or just being honest. However, what they were actually doing was gaining influence from your failure. And they never imagined there would be a cost. They won sympathy, formed alliances, and acquired confidence by turning others against you. They portrayed themselves as the victim, hero, and wise one, all the while dragging your reputation through the mud behind closed doors. But here's something they didn't comprehend. God maintains receipts, and paradise doesn't just reward the innocent. It exposes the manipulators. Everything they achieved through dishonor is now being overturned. The same credibility they stole under your name is beginning to crumble. People are waking awake. The truth, which was previously hidden under layers of deception, is now emerging without your intervention. Your reputation is being rebuilt naturally, not via vengeance or clapbacks, but through divine intervention. God is turning the mic. The audience that formerly applauded your mockers is now uneasy. The applause has gone down. The tale is no longer working since the fruit does not lie, and those who attempted to damage you are now reaping unpleasant consequences. Their serenity is gone, their favor is fading, and their ties are fraying because what they established was never true. It was based on falsehoods. You do not have to justify yourself. You don't need to explain. Your quiet is not weakness. It's a strategy. Because while they performed, God was preparing a divine reversal. And now their greatest disgrace is playing out in the very places where they previously attempted to humiliate you. That's not a coincidence. That's God making sure everyone understands the difference between genuine favor and borrowed fame. Number 8. Heaven was never neutral. It waited for the scales to tilt. You assumed God was quiet because he was attempting to determine who was correct. But there was never any doubt. Heaven was never neutral. God wasn't pacing the floors of eternity, wondering whether you'd earned it. He observed everything from the beginning. Every lie, every plan, every time they grinned in your face while stabbing you in the back. His quiet did not indicate hesitancy. It was a strategy. He was allowing them to reveal their whole hand. He was allowing them to go as far as they could, not because he was bewildered, but because they were. They believed they were winning. They misunderstood heaven's tolerance for acceptance. They assumed that since lightning did not hit the middleman, they were safe. However, they were unaware that divine time does not function in the same way as the human ego. God was not hurrying to quiet them. He was allowing them to create the same rope on which they would hang their own credibility. The longer they spoke, the more they disclosed and exploited, the deeper their trap got. Now the scales have tipped. God was never comparing your value to theirs. That was already determined. He was assessing how much injustice he would tolerate before reacting. And now the measure is full. The gavel is coming down. The verdict is not confusing. It is fury. Not the emotional type, but the heavenly one. The type that reorganizes everything. The sort that demolishes false power systems and exposes every falsehood used to promote the wrong people. This is irreversible. No rebranding. No, we have all made errors. Speech capable of undoing previous actions. They damaged your reputation, tranquility, and spirit. Everything is coming back to them now, doubled. And not because you wanted for it or prayed for vengeance, but because God waited. And while waiting, he enabled justice to be evident. You no longer need to argue your case. Heaven has already decided in your favor. And now, the same silence that once shielded them is ready to judgment them openly, utterly, and forever. Number 9, they weren't battling you. They were resisting the version of you that God was about to unleash. They were not battling you. Not really. They were truly afraid of the version of you that they suspected was on the way. The future you who cured you. That anointed, uplifted, unstoppable version of yourself that would expose every lie they uttered in light of who you really are. They recognized some of your potential. Instead of rejoicing, they worried. Because if you become what God said you would be, they would be revealed not just as liars, but also as insecure, manipulating cowards. So they moved quickly. They attempted to assassinate you before the ascension. They attacked your name before your platform gained traction. They spread stories, distorted facts, and created friction in the goal of undermining your reputation before people could see your results. They didn't only want to harm you. They were attempting to erase the future. But this is the bit they didn't expect. God let them. They proceeded without being stopped by God. Not because he agreed, but because he knew something the others didn't. He understood that every effort to bury you would simply set the scene. Each untruth would become fuel. Every treachery would be proven. And now that they have exhausted every plot, God is elevating you boldly, truthfully, and unashamedly. Your ascension is the solution. This is the response. It is a matter of judgment. God did not clap back. He created you. You became proof that no weapon designed against you succeeded. No falsehood, no scheme, no treachery. And now your promotion does more than simply honor you. It condemns them. Not with vengeance, but with results. Because when people see you prosper despite all the filth hurled at your name, they will recognize the truth. The falsehoods were not convincing enough since the favor was genuine. Nothing scares your opponents more than seeing you become unstoppable. Number 10. They mistook your charity for helplessness, and it was their undoing. They assumed you didn't fight back because you couldn't. They misinterpreted your kindness for weakness. They mistook your calm, serene, and elegant demeanor for powerlessness, fear, or self-doubt. They never realized, however, that your quiet was not acquiescence. It was a spiritual practice. It was a miraculous alignment. You didn't spare them because they were untouchable. You spared them because you were protected. You had every opportunity to retaliate. You had enough truth to expose them, and enough receipts to burn the whole circus down. You might have matched their intensity and humiliated them in return. But your spirit whispered, "Don't." Something said, "Stand still. This is not your struggle. Let God handle it." So you did. You saw them laugh, gloat, and boast as if they'd won something, while heaven was counting every act of restraint as righteousness on your behalf. They were too haughty to see the reality. They reasoned that there were no imminent implications. They had gotten away with it. This is what pride does. It blinds individuals to God's patience and makes them believe they are invincible. But kindness isn't approval, and delaying does not imply denial. Mercy is God deferring judgment to allow people time to repent. However, when they utilize that delay to double down on wickedness, they are unaware that they are building their own tomb slowly, smugly, and in front of an audience. The weight is now gone. Heavens are no longer holding back. The constraint that was on them has been loosened. And what's coming is more than simply repercussions. It is clarity. People are going to discover what was concealed. Those who laughed with them will begin to doubt everything. Their affiliations will disband. Their remarks will eventually work against them. Because when compassion stops, exposure starts. And when exposure starts, so does the idiot. They were not unbreakable. They were just being saved because of you. But now that heaven has released the case, their protection is gone. You never had to destroy them. All you needed to do was withstand them. And now survival is what determines their destiny. A number. They said God would not do anything until they understood his delay was their death sentence. They really felt that God would do nothing. They ridiculed your religion. They laughed at your weeping. They proclaimed your name boldly, believing they had silenced heaven with their lives. And when no lightning struck, no doors banged shut, and you didn't come out fighting, they became complacent and arrogant, believing that God was either sleeping or indifferent. They mistook heavenly delay for divine apathy, and here is where they sealed their own fate. They didn't realize that God's delays are never due to uncertainty. It's because he's piling his weight. Thunder does not burst. The moment the sky darkens, it waits. It develops. It rumbles deep under the surface, extending across time, waiting for the right moment to strike so that the whole continent may hear it. That is how judgment moves. It doesn't appear only to frighten people. It shows up to alter the mood. They believed they had beaten the system. They continued repeating that if God existed, he would have done something by now. But God was doing something. He was observing. He was recording. He was giving them time to fix the harm, repent, and humble themselves. But instead of backing down, they went farther. They ridiculed harder. They rallied more people. They did not only sin, they recruited. And God, in his kindness, still waited. However, the delay was not beneficial to them. It was for yours. So when the gavel eventually fell, no one could claim you wished for this. Nobody could blame you since you didn't have to move a finger. The thunder's echoes are now rolling in. Everything they accomplished in secret is now coming to light. The folks who applauded their wickedness are now pulling away. Their laughter has gone to stillness. Their confidence is dissipating into bewilderment. They didn't anticipate God to come up in this way. Not quiet or sluggish, but final. This isn't a negotiation. It is revenge. Not because you asked for it, but because heaven approved it. The God they believed was ignoring you is suddenly the one they can't avoid. The delay that they mistook for safety was precisely what allowed their judgment to expand. Now the storm has arrived, and they are standing in the thunder they said would never happen. A number. Your quiet was not weakness. It was a legal approach in the court of heaven. Your quiet was not a loss. It was not a weakness. It wasn't passivity. It was a strategy. Not in the court of popular opinion, but in the courts of heaven. While they yelled at you, they lied about you and distorted your every word, you maintained your composure. Not because you didn't know what to say, but because you knew who was watching. You recognized something that most folks overlook. Sometimes the loudest argument is delivered in silence. Every time you chose peace over retribution, you were constructing a legal argument. Not on earth, but in the invisible world. What they did to you was not insignificant. It was not innocuous. It was calculated, consistent, and in some instances, brutal beyond description. But instead of fighting nasty, you remained clean. You walked away instead of clapping. You kept your head up while they sought to hide your name. You sobbed but did not curse. You broke down in private, but you didn't act out in public. And with each choice to maintain your integrity, you gave heaven more proof in the spiritual sphere. Restraint speaks volumes. Your silence captured every atrocity in real time. Every sigh, every night. You could not sleep. Every second you held your mouth, it became part of a holy file bearing your name. And now the file has arrived at heaven's courts, and the judge is not disputing his decision. God is moving for you right now because of your quiet. He's not coming in because you yelled loudly enough. He's coming in because your silence revealed who you are and who they are. Your silence was not empty. It was all about obeying. It was trust. And now it is your weapon. They felt you were disqualified, yet heaven utilized it to qualify you for divine intervention. They believed you lost. They believed you were over. But heaven saw what they didn't. A soul that refused to bow, and a spirit strong enough to believe God even when it hurts. Your vindication is not going to happen overnight. It is legally justifiable. Heaven is not only protecting you emotionally, it protects you legally. The case has been evaluated. The judgment is decided, and it is going to sound loud enough to drown out every lie they have ever said. A number. They attempted to write you off. God is now recreating history with your name in gold. They believe they had the ultimate say on your tale. They reasoned that if they removed your name from discussions, altered events, and wove just enough plausible falsehoods, you'd softly fade into the background. They intended to reduce you to a footnote in a story they controlled. So they covered the truth with rumor. They crossed your name out of the rooms you helped create. They murmured just enough poison to sway popular opinion. And for a time, it seemed to work. People went chilly and doors closed. Your character was questioned, and your presence was shunned. But here's a narrative surprise they never saw coming. God has editorial control over your tale. Heaven does not need their consent to modify the script. Every chapter that they attempted to delete is being retrieved, not only healed, but redeemed. Your name is not just getting cleansed, it is being crowned. Because when God restores, He does not just repair what was damaged. He raises it in front of the same people who attempted to destroy it. You see, this isn't your typical vindication. This is heavenly editing. God is not just editing a few pages. He's rewriting the whole history. The pen is dipped in justice. The ink is infused with dignity. The exact instances they attempted to delete are now the reasons you're getting promoted. The identical name they attempted to tarnish is now prominently displayed in gold, forever. Here's the greatest part. Heaven isn't consulting your adversaries for approval. They don't have a vote. They are not allowed to modify. They cannot add footnotes or disclaimers to the miracle. God is writing through your life. All they can do now is watch God raise the name they vowed would never rise again. Your narrative is not finished. It was just interrupted. But God is restarting the story, and the following section is being written with glory, honor, and indisputable strength. People who attempt to write you out are going to see your name inscribed in rooms they will never be able to access again. That is not vengeance. This is what happens when heaven broadcasts the truth. A number. They attempted to invalidate you. Now God is demanding. They openly validate you. They believe they could get away with treating you like you were nothing, and then discreetly go on. They discredited you boldly. They now wish to make peace in the darkness. They muttered falsehoods in masses, yet they wish to apologize in corners. But God does not tolerate that. Not this time. Not after everything they've done. What they don't realize is that repentance involves more than simply feeling awful. It's about setting things right. They didn't just damage your emotions. They harmed your reputation. They ruined your reputation in locations where you were not even there to defend yourself. And now God is not asking for silent regret. He is requesting public reparation. The same voices who humiliated you will be expected to write the record with the same zeal. They ridiculed you openly. They will now have to proudly respect you. They persuaded people to look down on you. Now they'll have to point those same folks back to you and admit we were incorrect. Because spiritual justice does not include shame. It is about divine equilibrium. What was done in public has to be remedied in public. Anything less would be incomplete remorse. Heaven does not perform half-healing. This goes deeper than vindication. This is a spiritual transaction. It is reparation. Respect, opportunity, and reputation were robbed from you, and they must be repaid with interest. God is not playing with your name. He saw the humiliation you faced. He saw you remain quiet, calm, and courteous while they pulled you. And now the gavel has fell. Heaven is not asking a private apology. It is seeking public approval. And they will have a choice. Restore what they have taken from your photograph, or face the judgment that comes when God has to do it for them. Regardless, you will be acknowledged loudly, plainly, and strongly. Because heaven does more than cure reputations. It also restores dignity. And when God comes in, He does more than simply protect your reputation. He establishes it. Allow them to speak. Allow them to distort their tales, alter time frames, and pretend they were innocent. Because at the end of the day, there's a judge who saw everything. And the courts in heaven is no longer in recess. The gavel has struck. The verdict was inscribed in flames. And the truth. Your truth is going to speak louder than any falsehood they attempted to cover you with. You were not merely assaulted. You were targeted because of your brightness. You weren't just rejected. You were sacrificed so that their shadows would not seem as dark. However, they never expected this. You were designated not for destruction, but for divine manifestation. They feared the agony would kill you. They believed their manipulation would define you. However, all they did was make you unmistakable. The ashes they attempted to bury you in are now the ink God is using to rewrite the next chapter of your life. And it's inscribed in large gold letters. It's not simply about justice. It is about reversal. It is about God reversing the stage that they attempted to use against you and turning it into a platform. Not just so you can yell, "I told you so," but now you may walk with indisputable evidence that heaven always triumphs, even if it takes a bit longer than planned. You will not need to debate. You are not required to clap back. The outcomes will speak louder than any words you might say. So do not shrink. Don't doubt your value because of individuals who are too damaged to see it. God is moving, And he is not coming as a comforter. He is coming as an avenger. Not because you pleaded, but because he is righteous. And virtue always corrects injustice. Your name will be restored. Your tale will be reported honestly. And those who believe they could get away with dishonoring you will either openly recognize the light they attempted to extinguish or see personally what happens when heaven replies with holy fire. God is not just vindicating you. He's establishing you. So remove your hands off the wheel. The chosen one. It is no longer your war. Now it's God's show. And you are the headline. If this message sparked a fire in your spirit and spoke to the truth, you've been carrying it in silence. Do not let it finish here. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another word intended just for you. Like this video to show the algorithm that truth still counts. Leave a comment below. Tell us how this resonated with you, what you've been through, and how you're overcoming it. Your voice might provide the affirmation someone else needs. Most essential, send this message to someone who has been wrongly condemned, abused, or silenced. Let them know that heaven isn't disregarding their grief. God is preparing their return. Let us distribute the divine justice far and wide. We are not merely creating a community. We are creating a movement. And your being here demonstrates that the chosen are rising, one truth at a time.